Okay, so right now I'm gonna go over exponents with negative values. This is one of those topics that a lot of students get confused with because of the way that the exponent and the base is written. And there's sometimes like those little tricks that are not that clear whenever we're working with exponents and negatives. So that's what I'm going to show you right now. So first of all, here on the first exercise, we have -2 and then to the second power. Now that negative, right, it's kind of belonging to the 2. However, the only value that is affected by the square here is the 2. So we can go ahead and rewrite this as negative and then 2 the square. So when you don't have parentheses around the negative, then what you're saying is that the number is the one that's being affected by the square and the negative is just like an outsider. So in this case, this will be negative times and then 2 times 2, right? So in that case, we will have negative times 4, which is -4. So when we have a -2 with no parentheses to the second power, we end up with a -4 as an answer. Now let's go ahead and see what happens if we have parentheses. So now that we have parentheses, this -2 squared means that we have -2 times -2. So in this case, the negative does belong completely to the 2, right? So here we have 2 times 2, which is 4, and then we have a negative, right, times a negative. Now let's remember from the rules that I provided to you for signs and multiplication, when we have two negatives, that becomes a positive, so the answer will be +4. So that's the difference between not having parentheses and having parentheses and a negative and exponents, right? So it does make a difference. So you have to be really careful and really cautious when it comes to keeping an eye on those. Let's go ahead and work on the next one. We have -5 to the third power, so that means that the negative is also being affected by the exponent 3. So this means -5 times -5 times -5. Okay, remember the exponent tells you how many times you multiply the number by itself. So in this case, we are kind of like paying more attention into the sign. So we have negative, a negative, and a negative. So these two are gonna make a positive, right? But then we still have that negative, the third negative, right, by which is being multiplied. And from the rules that we had on the previous slide, we know that a positive times a negative, it's going to give you a negative. Okay, so the first two negatives, when multiplied, it became a positive, but then that positive multiplies the third negative, so the answer at the end is going to be a negative. And now 5 times 5 times 5, it's 125. Okay, now let's go ahead and do this without parentheses. So again, the negative is not being affected by the exponent, so we're gonna leave it outside. So we have 5 to the third power, so this is gonna be negative times 5 times 5 times 5. Now all the 5's inside, I just realized I put an extra multiplication sign. So this is 5 times 5 times 5. We know that this is going to become 125. So this will be negative 125. So the negative comes from this one outside. Everything inside is positive, so 125 will be positive. So at the end, the answer is negative 125. So we noticed that when we had an exponent that was 3, the answers were the same. However, when our exponent was 2, the answers changed, right? We had a -4 when there was no parentheses and a +4 when there was a parentheses. Okay, so the parentheses, again, they do make a difference. Now let's go ahead and try the next one. So here we have -3 to the 3rd power. So that means we're going to have -3 times -3 times -3. So basically, we can see that for the first two, right, we have a negative and a negative, right? So this negative times this negative will make a positive, and then 3 times 3, it's 9, right? However, we still have the third -3, so times -3. So we know that that positive times that negative, it's going to give us a negative. So this is going to be negative and then 27. Okay. So the first two negatives gave us a +9, but we're multiplying times another negative, so it becomes -27. Now let's go ahead and go over the third one, the second one. So -8 to the 2nd power. So here we have -8 times -8. Now we know that negative times negative, it's going to make a positive. So this is going to be a positive, and then 8 times 8 gives you 64. Let's try the next one. -6 to the 4th power. So here we'll have -6 times -6 times -6 times -6. So when we are multiplying, let's go ahead and take a look at the negative. So what's going to happen with them? So we have negative times negative, right? This is going to create a positive. But then we are multiplying times a negative. So that will become negative, right? Because a positive times a negative gives you negative. And then that negative, it's going to multiply a negative, so that's going to leave us with a positive. Okay, so we have a positive, and then 6 times 6 times 6 gives us 1,296. Okay, now let's go over the last one. -7 to the 5th power. So this is -7 times -7 times another -7 times another -7 and times another -7. So here we're gonna face something similar to the last one. So we do negative times negative gives you a positive. However, this is multiplying a negative, so now that will become negative, right? But this negative, it's multiplying another negative, so that will make it a positive. And then this positive will multiply that negative, so at the end, the answer will be negative. And then when we multiply 7 times 7 times 7 times 7, it's going to be negative 16,807. Okay, so what is the rule, and how can it be easier for us to know if it's going to be a positive or a negative at the end, right? Without having to multiply over and over again, and without using a calculator right away to know what the sign it's going to be. So if you notice, when we were working with even numbers, So with even numbers, right? So like the 2 and the 4, our answers were positive. However, when we were working with odd exponents, the answers were negative. So that plays a huge role. If the exponent is a even number, then our answers will always be positive. And this is saying that, considering that the negative is inside of the parentheses, not like in the first example where the negative was not part of the base with the exponent. So here our answers will always be positive. Okay. And then for the next one, it's if the exponent is odd, then the answers will be negative if we are working with a negative base, if we have a negative base. And positive, if the base is positive. So for the odd values, it does make a difference. For the even values, we're always going to have a positive, again, if we're working with parentheses, right? If we don't have parentheses, then it's not going to be a positive value. However, if it's an odd value, right? If it's odd, then the answers will be negative when there's a negative base. But if it's even, then the answers will always be positive. Okay, and this rule, this what I'm telling you right now, it's something that you guys are gonna kind of like be reviewing, and something you are gonna be going back to later on in more advanced courses after Math 101.